were nearly attacked by a lot of young men that thought we were coming with food and jumped into the trucks. When they discovered there were medical equipment in the boxes, they of course left it. But they were desperate. You saw it on the people. They were really desperate.
A doctor right in the north of Gaza talking to me about the situation there. Coming up on the programme.
On radio, on stage, TV, it's Beatles everywhere.
The book, helping dementia patients enjoy reading again. Do get in touch with us on social media. Hashtag BBCWATO. Our email address is worldat1@bbc.co.uk. More than 4,300 people were sleeping rough in London at the end of last year. That's the highest number since the figures first started being recorded in 2014, and a jump of 23% on the year before. The rise has happened while Sadiq Khan has been London's mayor, but he's now promising to eliminate rough sleeping if he's elected to a third term next month. I spoke to him about it, asking first why the numbers had gone up so much.
Over the last 8 years, we've managed to ease and address some of the issues with rough sleeping, but Conservative policies have exacerbated the rise in rough sleeping faster than we can ease them. The good news is we've shown we can make a difference with our outreach teams. With the StreetLink website, you can let us know where there's a rough sleeper. But we know in the past we've managed to almost end rough sleeping, and I'm so hopeful going forward a Labour mayor with a Labour government can end it for good.
It's such a weird thing to campaign on, because you're blaming Conservative policies there, but this has happened to you on your watch. You have been London mayor since 2016. Why campaign on it now?
Well, we've seen rough sleeping rise across the country. There is no region in the country where it's not risen. And as is often the case, our capital city takes the brunt of rough sleeping across the country. We know, though, we can reduce it. We also know we can end it. I'll give you some examples.
But
of
just before you
policies.
do, to go back to my first question is, why do you think it is happening? What is prompting the rise?
So 1 out of 4 rough sleepers actually were previously rented in private accommodation. So if the government fulfilled its promise made 5 years ago to end no-fault evictions, that'd be a 25% reduction in those from the private sector becoming homeless rough sleepers. We know also a lot of those who end up on the streets have mental ill health, are dependent on alcohol. Cuts in those services has led to people ending up on the streets. We know the government's welfare benefits changes from the two-child rule to the cap on benefits has led to an exacerbation of the housing crisis. And we also know that not building enough council homes across the country has caused a big problem.
Okay, but you recognise, I mean, it's a problem with housing, which is your responsibility as well. What should you have done to avoid this? I recognise that some of the problems you can lay at central government fairly, but some will also be down to your decisions.
There's not a lot we can do, bear in mind a lot of our policies are linked with central government. The good news, though, is we have taken 16,000 rough sleepers off our streets, more than 3/4 for good. We've built more than 1,500 long-term homes for rough sleepers. They're now off the streets, but we simply can't keep pace with the conveyor belt of new rough sleepers coming onto our streets. So the next Labour government are going to build 1.5 million homes, a majority of those affordable. That'll make a big difference as well.
Okay, on another issue, ULEZ, you have been sort of famous really for expanding the ultra-low emission zone across London. It's something that's affecting lots of cities with plans to try to curb car use. It will lose you votes, won't it?
Just like I won't put up with my children drinking dirty water, I'm not willing to put up with people in this great city of ours breathing air that leads to premature deaths, leads to children having stunted lungs, and leads to adults with a whole host of health issues from cancer to dementia. Our policies have shown to work. In central London, we've seen a reduction in toxicity as a consequence of ULEZ by almost 50%. In inner London, another difficult decision to expand that, a further 20% reduction.
My question was, the amount was about losing votes. You just accept that that's a necessary price to be paid, do you?
No, I don't accept that Londoners don't want clean air. It's an issue not just of environment, it's also an issue of health.
You're very much obviously tied to the image of London, the image of London overseas and also at home. And there have been a number of things recently with people talking about no-go areas in London as a result of protests over the Gaza conflict, but also impressions created of a lawlessness in London, and even Londoners in a poll recently, a YouGov survey, found a majority of Londoners feel health, housing and crime levels have got worse in the past year. Do you accept some responsibility for that?
The buck's up for me. I'm the mayor of this great city. It's really important that I do whatever I can to address some of the challenges facing that city. We've seen a massive rise, and an unacceptable rise, in both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. But I spent a lot of time with Jewish communities, a lot of time with Muslim communities. And what I'd say in a respectful way is we cannot allow what's happened in the Middle East to affect relations in our great city.
Okay, and on that, the survey, the YouGov survey that found a majority of Londoners felt health, housing and crime levels have got worse. 65% said housing was worse. 58% said crime in general had got worse. That's not a great record for you as London Mayor, is it?
Look, one victim of crime to me is one too many. I spent a lot of time meeting victims of crime, and it's so distressing. The good news, according to the ONS, not my figures, the ONS, is you're less likely to be the victim of violence in London than the rest of the country. You're less likely to be injured as a consequence of violence in London than the rest of the country. Since I've been mayor, notwithstanding government austerity, notwithstanding a population going up by more than 1 million, homicides down, gun crime down, the number of young people injured with a knife is down, burglary down.
Do you wish that, or do you have some concerns that the Labour leader Keir Starmer is taking what you might consider previously loyal, progressive urban voters for Labour, taking them for granted, and that Labour is in danger as a result, partly of its position on what's going on in the Middle East, of losing some Muslim voters and others over Gaza?
Keir's a friend of mine going back 25 years. I see this, he's the least complacent person I know. He helped me launch my campaign 4 weeks ago, demonstrating he's not, being complacent about London. The next week, Yvette Cooper was with me. The next week, Rachel Reeves, and last week, Ed Miliband. So the Shadow Cabinet is fully committed to an urban area like London. So I don't accept the premise that, Keir and the team are neglecting those sorts of urban voters.
Sadiq Khan, and we have, of course, invited Sadiq Khan's main opponents to come and speak to us over the next fortnight before the elections on May the 2nd, and we hope that they will take up our invitation. You can find a full list of candidates for all the elections taking place on May the 2nd on the BBC website. One of the sad things about dementia is that you stop being able to do the things you used to love doing, things like reading, writing, or even wanting to watch television. When the gerontologist Matt Singleton's father stopped reading, Matt designed a book using his knowledge of dementia, and it was such a success that he's now worked with the Alzheimer's Society on an illustrated book called Looking Back at the Beatles. Here's Bill Nye reading the audio version.
1963 to 1964. Here they come. They feel fine, adorned with mop-topped hair. On radio, on stage, TV, it's Beatles everywhere.
Bill Nye reading that. Well, Matt Singleton joins us now. Good afternoon, Matt.
Good afternoon.
Tell us how this book differs from another book about the Beatles.
So this book is specifically created for and with people living with dementia and their supporters, and along with the Alzheimer's Society. It's designed to bring joy to people living with dementia. It's designed to bring opportunities for social interaction.
So what's different? How does, if I had a book in front of me, how would it look different?
So what we've done is we've created a visual and sensory experience for people. So first of all, it's a familiar story, stories that people will be familiar with from their past, as you know, the Beatles. There's the audio version read by Bill Nye, but the pages work individually, so you can pick up any page of this story and you'll get a story in itself. And they also work collectively, so you can read the whole thing in one go. It uses rhyme and rhythm to stimulate recall. The illustrations beautifully done by Simon Reed. They have signposts in the book to help people recall classic memories.
Now, I know it's because of your dad, and the Beatles, because I'm guessing he loved the Beatles.
Yes, he certainly did, yes.
So what happened with you? Because he used to love reading, and you were what, sending him books?
No, I was always buying him books for birthday and Christmas, but one day my stepmother, Colleen, his wife, said, stop buying him books, he doesn't read them anymore. So I thought, well, first of all, that's my one idea for a gift gone. But also, of course, it was something I wanted to help him with because he was always an avid reader. So I wanted to help solve those problems as a gerontologist, as you've mentioned.
And what happened when you came up with, because I know this is a sort of there was a prototype. With the prototype that you did for him, what difference did it make?
Well, he just really enjoyed it. That was the first thing. It brought joy to him. The first prototype was all about his rock and roll heroes, and then the Beatles one was again about something he'd enjoy. But there are also things like exercises based on cognitive stimulation therapy at the back, which enabled him to create conversations and to participate more socially.
Okay, and you found he wasn't able to read a normal book, but he was able to read this.
Yes, he wasn't able to focus on the evolving positive story. So this book, with its individual pages, meant that he could duck in and out of it, and he really enjoyed it.
Okay, and I mean that, for anybody who knows someone with dementia, to see them just sitting, not doing anything, it's very depressing.
Yes, oh, absolutely. And that was the hard part, was seeing my dad lose something that had brought him so much joy in his life. And the clip you just heard by Bill Nye, he actually can now recite that from memory, which is extraordinary.
Right, that really is extraordinary. Well, listen, congratulations, Matt Singleton. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Britain's Olympic team had an official artist for the upcoming games in Paris, but not anymore. Max Denison-Pender has quit in protest over the government's support for Russian athletes competing at the games. Matt joins us now. Max, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, thank you.
Why? Why, I mean, given that there's a sort of the situation with Russian athletes and Russia has been known about for some time, why decide to quit?
400 reasons why I quit, and there's 400 reasons and counting, and this is 400 athletes from Ukraine who've been murdered by Russians, on some accounts being tortured, and this is, you know, they would never ever now no longer have the chance of competing in the Olympics, and I see it unfit to invite Russia to the party. Now I obviously understand there's a neutral flag. This doesn't stop Belarus, does not stop Putin using this as propaganda to tell his country that the rest of the world have accepted him and his rules in a way. His
right. Now the 400, we're talking about athletes who were effectively fighting for Ukraine, which is why they were killed rather than...
both. Some did. Some volunteered. Some got called up, and some just got blown up, you know, at home.
Sure, but the connection, they happened to be athletes. There was no particular connection.
Exactly. Yes. What do you mean? Sorry.
Well, no, it's just that you said they were tortured, so I just wanted,
yes. On some accounts, so the Kharkiv community of human rights, essentially, is a city in Ukraine. They reported that one of the marathon runners perhaps got tortured on his capture, and things like that. And for me personally, I'm an artist, and I got inspired very much by the Ukrainians' strength and resiliency at the beginning of the war, and I really wanted to go and paint them and tell their story. We ended up raising £30,000 for tourniquets, which annoyingly is only 1,000 tourniquets. I wish it was a bit more. But we did good, and I'm doing current and future work with them, and they're my friends, and 3 of them have died since I've been. The hat, they were on radio, they can't see, but I've got a hat with me. It's a friend of mine gave me before he died. He asked me to paint his friends, and I painted them before they went to front line, and a few weeks later he died himself, and never got a chance to sit for a painting.
I'm just wondering about the process of resigning, because you had started to paint people for Team GB, hadn't you?
Exactly. So, 2020, the Olympics, obviously COVID got in the way of that, but I was lucky enough to paint Anthony Joshua, Ben Whittaker, very awesome up-and-coming boxer, Morgan Lake, and some up-and-coming athletes. The exhibition was essentially those who are and will be and were GB athletes and represented the UK.
But the idea is you would have gone to Paris and you would have painted there.
Yeah, very much so, and I was looking forward to it. And you know, it's one that my conscience can allow me to do, knowing that I'm going to go back and look my friends in the eye and say Slava Ukraine, and I know that I can show them support from over here and show.
It's an interesting one. I mean, the challenge clearly you're making clear it was the principle. Presumably there'll be another artist employed. You could have gone. You could have found a way to.
100%. No, I'm very happy. Ben Molesley, the other artist in residence, Team GB, he'll smash it. He'll do a great job, you know. And I know, yeah.
But your complaint is that Russians are there. Are you saying that Britain should be boycotting the games because Russians are there?
Well, there's no difference from the original sanctions we made back when the invasion started. This is a sanction. One could argue that not every athlete agrees with Putin's regime. Same as, let's say, those in Russia doing trade with England. Not all of those agree with Russia with Putin's regime. However, they are being led by him, for better or for worse. This is Putin's Russia. And I know that the medals won.
They won't be in any Russian uniform. There won't be the Russian anthem.
So a little example. In March 22, just after the Russian invasion, there was a gymnast who, this was before the neutral kit and the neutral flag came into the conversation. The athlete had a Z on his top when he got the bronze medal. This is the same Z that is on the tanks that's destroying children, families, a really inappropriate invasion.
And do you think athletes will be emblazoning Z on their uniforms, or even having
Who's to say? I mean, in the end of the day...
So to come back to my question, you're resigning. Are you saying that the whole British team should be boycotting it?
Well, it's not mine to say. I'm saying my opinion. These are my friends, and I have massive relationships and connections with all of them. I have a big heart for Ukraine, and I see them as amazing people. I, for one, cannot do it, and now I'm not going to speak on behalf of them, and they were very understanding about where I stand, and they know I was there.
Max Dennison-Pender, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, if you think your art is brilliant but doesn't get the recognition it deserves, then from Friday you can hang it in a new exhibition called Then and Now, Whose Gallery Is It Anyway? It's taking place at a gallery in Edinburgh called Edinburgh Printmakers. Janet Archer is the CEO of the gallery. Good afternoon, Janet.
Hello.
How is this going to work?
Well, so we wanted to open up this exhibition to the public. We're a publicly funded institution with funding from the National Archery Heritage Fund and from Creative Scotland and others. And we decided that we wanted to open up our space, our converted industrial space, to people from across Edinburgh or elsewhere and invite them to bring an artwork of their choice and hang it in our gallery.
Okay, so it could be theirs or somebody else's?
It needs to be theirs, although, we're open to people, if they're not confident enough to bring their own work, then if they want to bring somebody else's work, then that's entirely fine.
And do they then have to pass you? Do you have a look at it and go, no, that's not good enough?
No, so we want to be completely open, and so we're inviting people to bring works of their choice, and we're absolutely open to works in progress as well as completed works, with the hope that that will welcome more people, first-time visitors, and give people courage to be able to come into a welcoming gallery space.
And how many hooks do you have on your walls?
Well, that's a good question. We've got shelves. So we've got shelves for framed works, and then if somebody's bringing something that could be taped lightly onto the wall, they can also do that.
So you might have people just shoving things over so they can squeeze their work in. I'm just wondering about how you compete for space on the wall.
So we're going to talk to people visiting the gallery about curation and the importance of respecting everybody's work, and also thinking about the relationship between different works as they view them. So we're hoping that people won't just shove works around, but they'll actually be thoughtful and think about how their works sit in line with other things that are offered to us.
But the idea is literally that somebody could come in, or even if they don't have a work of art, think, well, actually, I think that would look better over there on a different wall, and you're open to that.
Exactly, because I think art making sometimes can be a very solitary practice. We're an open access studio. We have a large studio where many artists work together and collaborate, talk to each other, learn from each other. And we wanted to translate that spirit of open access print studio into the gallery, where people can actually get to know people, connect people, talk about what works, what doesn't, and open up a conversation about the relationship between art and artists and audiences and curators.
Right, and if somebody brings their 5-year-olds in, a whole group of them, that's fine too?
It's absolutely fine. So if people are bringing groups in, there's a list of things that they can sort of find some information on our website which tells them if somebody wants to bring a group in, then we'd appreciate
I was more wondering about the quality of art. Is there a bar too low?
Well, I say work in progress is fine, and everybody has to start somewhere.
Wonderfully positive idea. We look forward to hearing how it goes. Janet Archer, thank you very much. Well, that is it from us for today. PM will be here at 5 as usual. I'm Sarah Montague, and that's the world of 1:45.
Studio direction was by Adrian Bargava. The editor was Luke Mintz. Now on Radio 4, we join the materials scientist Mark Miodownik for Glued Up, the sticky story of humanity. A look at the sticky substances that have shaped our species since the dawn of civilization.
Early in spring 2023, a story in the news caught my attention.
Inspectors found a defect on a nuclear submarine, it has emerged. HMS Vanguard was found to have a defect from work done in the past, the Ministry of Defence has said.
Apparently, the defect was that the workers had used superglue to carry out repairs on the reactor chamber. Some bolts on the cooling pipes had been over-tightened. The heads had snapped off, and instead of replacing the bolts, someone had glued the heads back on again. Now, you might think this is just one of those funny stories about state-level bungling. But what I find so interesting is that at first glance, using superglue to hold together something as complex and important as a nuclear sub is a terrible idea. Look a bit closer, however, and you'll see that nearly all of our high-tech modern world is held together by glue. From phones to wind turbines, from cars to planes, from our shoes to the fillings in our teeth, our society would literally fall apart without adhesives. In fact, it's no exaggeration to say that glues underpin many of our greatest technological leaps forward as a species. It turns out that the story of humanity is surprisingly sticky. I'm Mark Miodownik. I'm a material scientist and engineer from University College London. I'm fascinated by the story of materials and humans, how the stuff we make makes us who we are. Over the next 5 episodes, I'll be looking at the sticky substances that have shaped us. Because the thing is, we're used to naming the eras of civilization after materials. The Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and so on. But our use of adhesives probably predates all of those.
They were there all along, probably before humans used stones, and throughout our prehistory people used adhesives. They were probably the only material that allowed you to combine very different objects.
This is Hiske Langejans from Delft University in the Netherlands. She studies ancient adhesives and how they transformed the early technology of our ancestors.
The oldest uses are to make tools, so you have the blade made from stone for a knife, and you connect it to a handle, and you use an adhesive to do this. A tool with a handle is more precise and it can deliver more force.
But glues could do much, much more than that.
Some adhesives are also waterproof, so maybe you add on top of a basket to reinforce the basket, and in order to waterproof that whole construction.
These materials also played a role in early forms of art.
For example, you have a pigment and you want to attach it to your cave wall, but it doesn't stick on its own, this pigment, so you need to add something. Could be a resin, could be starch.
And they even helped prehistoric people play some of the first games.
Adhesive can also be quite thick, like clay-like or putty-like. So it also allows you to make objects on their own, and we know that board games in prehistory sometimes had pieces made from resins.
When you think of great leaps forward in prehistoric technology, you might think of taming fire, making stone flints, or learning to make clothes. But our ability to make glues was just as important, and it's something we've been doing for a very long time.
The earliest known adhesive is about 190,000 years old, and that was found in Italy on two very simple stone flakes, and these objects were made by Neanderthals. They have birch tar on them, so birch bark tar is tar made from bark from the birch tree. You just get a sticky, deep black putty.
That's absolutely fascinating. Birch bark tar. How did our ancestors make it?
Birch is a very distinct tree. Yeah? It has white papery bark, so you heat the bark to quite high temperatures. The problem is these people in the Stone Age don't have fireproof containers, so my team and I experimented with different ways to make tar. What you can do, very simple, is actually to roll your bark up, sort of like a very large cigar, put that in a hole in the ground, and on top of that, you light a little fire, and then you wait. And the top of this cigar starts smoldering, tar is produced, and it drips down, and that's a relatively simple way to make tar the historic style.
What I find really interesting about Gieske's work is that she isn't just trying to understand the material properties of those prehistoric glues. By recreating how they would have been made, she's trying to go back in time, inside the minds of the Neanderthals using it.
We want to get an understanding of this process. Do you need a lot of firewood? How long does the process take? How difficult is it to make these adhesives? Because there were quite a lot of assumptions where colleagues said, oh, making tar is very difficult. And it is a sign that Neanderthals were very smart because they were making these adhesives. We sort of started asking ourselves, like, well, then what is difficult? And how would you actually measure that? And with that, we try to link it to cognition, elements of cognition. For example, working memory.
Do we underestimate how much materials knowledge they must have had, or they might have had a language perhaps, for understanding a good tar or bad tar, the idea of temperature even?
This is really up for debate, I would say. Like, archaeologists can argue about this. Are these technologies a sign that people were communicating about this and that they were also transferring knowledge from one generation or from one individual to the next? I would say yes, but there are colleagues that disagree with that. But you do need to have some sort of understanding of quite abstract concepts like time and, you know, what makes a good adhesive.
Adhesives like birch bark tar can provide a fascinating glimpse into the abilities of early humans and Neanderthals. Millennia after these people had died, the tools and materials they created tell a story of how they lived and what they were capable of. But who actually were these people? What did they look like? For a long time, we've only been able to imagine answers to these questions. But the amazing thing about birch bark tar is that it also contains physical traces of the people who used it, preserved in glue for thousands of years.
We find pieces of it across, different archaeological sites, and then some of them have these tooth imprints, suggest that they were chewed, and that's where it becomes interesting because, there's a question as to why anybody would chew that stuff in the first place, and then through the chewing you get DNA that can get trapped essentially in these lumps of tar, and that's the DNA that we can recover using our methods.
This is Hannes Schroeder, a researcher from the University of Copenhagen who studies ancient DNA, and over the past few years he's been extracting genetic material from chewed prehistoric birch bark tar.
So the first piece we ever looked at was from a early Neolithic site on the island of Lolland, so this is in Denmark, and it was around 6,000 years old. So 6,000 years ago, somebody chewed on the gum, spat it into the reeds there at the coastline of southern Lolland, and then I think it was around 2015 or so, an archaeologist stumbled across that piece, and then we got hold of it and managed to extract DNA from it.
I mean, that's amazing in itself, isn't it? But I just wondered if you have any thoughts as to why they were chewing it. Is it a kind of ancient chewing gum? It doesn't sound like it would be very nice.
I've tried it, and it's not particularly pleasant. It doesn't taste that great. It clings to your teeth. Still there a few days after, even with vigorous brushing. Couldn't really get it off. The different ideas ideas as to why people may have chewed it. On the one hand, when it cools down, it kind of hardens, and then in order to get it into a state again where you can work it, you have to kind of warm it up again. Yeah, I guess you could put it in a pot, but like, well, it may have been easier to just pop in your mouth and chew on it. And that way, maybe also with the saliva kind of to soften it, and that then can be used for hafting stone tools. So that's one idea, but people have also suggested, because there's some components in the tar actually that are kind of antibacterial, antimicrobial, and so people have also suggested that it may have been chewed to help with toothache, perhaps, you know, as a kind of antiseptic.
But you found in your work DNA from these bits of chewed birch bark glue. Are you surprised it survived?
So the oldest DNA, you know, now to put things a bit into perspective, is 2 million years old, and that's from some permafrost in Greenland. So if the conditions are right, DNA can preserve really well. But we think that this material is like a time capsule, really. It protects the DNA.
And what did you find about the person who was chewing this particular piece of birch bark tar?
The amazing thing with these artifacts is that there are all these different types of DNA. So on one hand, you've got human DNA. So in the case of Lola, as she was called, because a piece of gum was found on Lolland, so we know, you know, that she lived kind of in a coastal environment. In terms of their lifestyle, so this community subsisted at that point still on hunting, gathering, and fishing. Through the DNA, you can reconstruct aspects of what people looked like. So she likely had dark skin, so darker than what people look like nowadays in Northern Europe, but she had blue eyes. On top of that, we cover microbial DNAs. So for example, she was infected, as many people are, virus, Epstein-Barr virus it's called. It's a herpes virus actually. And lastly, we also get DNA out of them that tells us something about people's diet, because the DNA of whatever they just ate would also get trapped in the lung. She had just jumped on a bit of duck and some hazelnuts.
So you're saying that this person liked duck with hazelnuts? Sounds like a good combo to me.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, it is mind-blowing with the technology and the developments over the last few years, the kind of rich information that we can find out about people in the past. It is quite amazing, and the birch tar, these chewing gums are really central to it, because that's the key to getting the DNA.
So not only are birch bark tars fascinating examples of ancient technology, they're a time capsule of information about the people who used them. These prehistoric artifacts show adhesives really have been with us since the dawn of civilization. In fact, they were a key part of getting civilization going in the first place. Birch bark tar allowed early people to invent new and better tools. And they tell us that early gluers had the cognitive abilities to manipulate materials using heat, to deliberately create stickiness. Early mastery of adhesives allowed our ancestors to express themselves by creating sticky pigments, which they used to decorate themselves and create cave paintings, which reveal that early humans had a culture of expressionist art that rivals anything created today. And glues were even used to invent chewing gum. Not the same gum we use today, of course, but it does make me think that archaeologists in the future might learn a lot about us from the chewing gum stuck to pavements in our cities. You may be wondering what modern chewing gum is made of. It's polyisobutylene, better known as rubber. And in the next program, we'll be chewing over how that particular sticky substance came to change the world in which we live.
Glued Up, the sticky story of humanity, was presented by Mark Miodownik and produced by Anand Jagatir. It was a BBC Studios audio production for Radio 4. You can listen to the next episode at the same time tomorrow. The whole series is on BBC Sounds. In a few minutes here on Radio 4, Kate attempts to be diplomatic in The Archers. First, question for us.
Where did China come from, and what is it now?
Misha Glennon on the origins of China.
China is the rising power in the world, challenging the authority of the West on the global stage. We have to know about Chinese history if we're to engage with the country in the coming century.
The first emperor of China really set the style for the whole government for 2,000 years.
Can you have unity without authoritarian control?
The invention of China begins next Monday morning at 11 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds. BBC News at 2 o'clock. Rishi Sunak is preparing to give a statement to the House of Commons about Britain's role in helping repel an Iranian missile and drone attack on Israel over the weekend. RAF jets were involved in the operation to shoot down the weapons. The Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron has urged Israel not to respond to Tehran with violence. Our security correspondent Frank Gardner says Israel could take several paths.
They could do a cyber attack, which they've done before, allegedly, inserting the Stuxnet virus into Iran's civil nuclear program. They could do assassinations, which they have allegedly done before, of Iranian nuclear scientists. They could hit Iranian proxies, which they've been doing for the last few months and years, or they could go for a limited strike on the bases from which these missiles were launched. That would still be seen as an escalation, and Iran would almost certainly respond.